So when I was researching into the Altbros, I stumbled upon this website, Islam for Europeans. At first, you see this big banner with only white Muslims praying. I think it was a stock photo from Bosnia. And you had articles such as white converts should only marry white converts. And I thought, that's it, bingo, I found them, Muslim white supremacists. I am really fascinated by fringe movements and things that appear paradoxical, because how can you be Muslim and white supremacist? But after digging deeper into the articles, the podcast, and having interviewed the main person behind the website, I came to the conclusion that no, it's nothing to do with white supremacy. They have very different intentions, but maybe the way it's communicated could be a bit tweaked. To be honest, I would not be surprised if at some point in the future we come across actual Muslim white supremacists, because we have Muslims who are anti-black people, anti-women, anti-Palestine, Muslims joining far-right parties like Reform UK, and who internalize the Islamophobic narrative that Islam is inherently violent and all Muslims, all the 2 billions of Muslims are violent. So anything in this day and age is possible. But there's actually one initiative that we're gonna see this at the end, where I saw a video and the guy actually drew a pyramid where you had at the top descendants of the Prophet, then white people and some other people, and this is really concerning. But we'll come to this at the end of the video. So in this video, I want to explore the concept of having spaces for only white Muslim converts specifically. A lot of it has been covered already in the interview I did with Robert, which the previous video, I'll put a link in the description. And to be honest, I think a lot of the things he said and clarified during the interview are completely reasonable. It's just, I think, the mixture of words and imagery in his website and some of the videos he did about or with people who are like on the hard right Muslim part of the spectrum can induce a bit of confusion. But I also understand it is an initiative which is very specific to the North American context, which is very different from the European, let alone British context. And a lot of ideas actually get lost in communication. Maybe I'm completely wrong, but from what I get through the interview, I think it was completely reasonable so far. The title of this video is a bit provocative on purpose, because the problem with white convert, what does it mean? Does it mean that they are a problem, or does it mean that they have problems? Because actually lots of white converts have a big problem, and this problem is isolation, which is one of the main reasons why Robert decided to take over and manage the website Islam for Europeans. He defines it as a third space, not a safe space, because the term safe space is very heavily loaded, and I don't believe there's such thing as a safe space. He wants a space for white Muslims in the specific North American context to find people who have similar journeys, similar experiences, and share similar culture. It comes from a place of care, because rightfully lots of white new Muslims are isolated, because it can be because the family rejects them, it's because they are having troubles adapting to a different culture, especially if they marry into a born Muslim family. There's a lot of suspicion around white new Muslims, especially that was the case after 9/11, because the FBI used either white Muslim converts or informants who pretended to be Muslim to infiltrate mosques and other organizations and spy on Muslims. And in the past years, with the social justice movements, a lot of questions have been raised about the place of white people and within Muslim communities, the place of white Muslims in these spaces. So he argues that a lot of people white converts are ashamed of their culture and their identity, or just don't know what to do with it, which I believe is changing very slowly. He deplores that there is no celebratory spaces for white Muslim culture, because whereas groups which are made of descendants of immigrants, whether it is in Europe and North America, they have, like the Somali Cultural Association, the Pakistani Cultural Association, like students' associations, but there is no such thing for white new Muslims. He also deplores that because of the lack of support from Muslim organizations, there is an 80% dropout rate among converts, meaning that if you take 100 people who embrace Islam, out of them, 80% will leave the religion at some point. I'm not sure where the statistic comes from, but it could be anecdotal. This is something he may have observed in his local area. I know that some converts leave the religion at some point, but I've never seen any proper poll figure or a study made about it. And a lot of new Muslims, myself included, have actually felt really isolated. Some have it much worse than me, and because, sometimes the family can be really, really antagonistic, really aggressive. And embracing the faith means for some people losing literally everything: jobs, friends, family, property even. And in a highly stratified society like the UK, it makes things difficult because if you don't belong to a particular ethnicity, it can be very, very hard to fit in and find a group with whom you can thrive and flourish. But when the UK communities have a culture of gatekeeping, for example, things are very different in France, where I had a wonderful, wonderful experience, and same for many new Muslim I know in France, because there is more social and cultural fluidity and mobility in the society. Robert's main argument is the idea of the Medina Model. This is something we completely agree with. At the time, at the very beginning of the Quranic revelation, people of different cultures, social and economic backgrounds were together in this mission for the cause. There were no barriers. It was having a family outside of your blood family. Whoever was Muslim, it was, I have your back and you have mine. But Robert argues that this is not the reality we see today, and I've observed the same thing, and we'll talk more about it in the chapter about the Ummah, the concept of Ummah, that now Muslim communities have become so divided for many, many reasons that it is not the case. It doesn't mean that because you're Muslim that any other Muslim will support you, be your friend, or agree with you, or be your brother, as it should be. I've touched a little bit upon it in the chapter 2, faith folk ain't kinfolk. Whoever shares the same religion is not going to necessarily be your friend. But what's very interesting is Robert puts forward the model of Chiapas in Mexico. It's a town where a lot of people have embraced Islam, and they have created their own very specific culture around it. And you have kind of similar initiatives like Jan in Slovakia. I did an interview with him as well. I think it's a wonderful initiative. They create their own autochthonous version of Islamic practices in these spaces. In a nutshell, he argues that if white new Muslims cannot find a community to belong to, they can create their own. And this is why he established the website. And one thing I respect is that he doesn't blame born Muslim communities for that, because he recognizes that they are on survival mode. So how can you expect the local mosque of uncles who are struggling financially, who may have difficulties with the family, to support new Muslims who come to the faith? Local communities do not necessarily have the right tools, the right skills, and the right resources to support new Muslims. It's not an excuse, because it's in the Quran. Converts have a very important place in the religion, and people should do their best to support them. But the social reality is different. If you don't have a community, build yours. And this is a philosophy I adopted a few years ago when I realized that people who share the same faith are not necessarily going to support you, far from it. But so my perspective is, in the past, I used to attach myself to whoever was Muslim, identify as Muslim, even if they were complete harami. But now my rule is to befriend and support whoever is a godly person, regardless of the culture, regardless of the religion. If your action and your discourse are godly, if you are supporting me, if your presence nurtures me, then you're part of my community. But maybe because the North American context is a bit different, so he argues this is something that exists in mainstream American culture, just like you have the Italian Cultural Association, the Polish Cultural Association, and people in the US, for example, are always sometimes proud of being of European descent. Oh, I'm American, but of Italian descent, of Polish descent, of Irish descent, because North America is a country of immigration, and people tend to bond through their ancestral lineage. Of course, there's always nuance, because it's not any kind of immigration is well looked upon. It has to be tick certain boxes, as always is the US. We had a discussion about this idea that white converts should marry white converts as well. So he comes again, it's from a place of and cultural congruence, because his opinion, intercultural marriages are less likely to work than people of the same culture. And he says that, in one of his articles, he says that, if you were to marry someone, might as well marry someone who's a student as well at the same level, rather than marry someone who could be your teacher, meaning someone who has more knowledge and has journeyed for longer into the faith. He argues that the families can get along better as well. So this is something I understand. However, the reality is much more nuanced. Firstly, it's not because you are from a different culture that the marriage is going to automatically fail. But second, it's not because you belong to the same culture that the marriage is going to automatically work. So one example I mentioned in our conversation is South Asian marriages in the UK, where, at least back then, less now, but people would marry only if they are of the same social economic background, the same caste, like Rajput, Mochi, and so on, and the same village sometimes. It never guaranteed that a marriage is going to work or not. I know people who married from these, like all the boxes they tick is exactly the same, but it's an awful marriage. And the reason why is because they don't have the same value, they don't have the same purpose and aim in life. And more importantly, they don't have the tools and the skills to make a marriage last. And that's because the society, the communities, do not provide preparation for marriage, how to resolve a conflict, how to manage the finances, how to manage the pressure of the parents and the in-laws. And from what I've observed, whether it is in the workplace, whether it is in the charity sector, whether it is in interpersonal relations, the main issue is not culture or even the understanding of religion, but its values. How do you see yourself in the society? What is your purpose on earth? What is your mission? What are your principles as a human? If you see something you disagree with, how are you going to react to it? If you have some flaws, can you see your flaws? Can you improve yourself? Can you become a better person? And even if we consider white-only Muslim spaces in general, I think it's a good idea to put people who have the same experiences and the same journey together. And I'm sure it can help a lot of people, but again, it doesn't guarantee that the dynamics are going to be very smooth, especially if I imagine something like that. In the UK, North America is again very different. In the UK, the society is so stratified that if you put in the same room a Muslim white convert male who, let's say, is born in the north of England from a working class family, who has struggled with, has a history of mental health or prison, and in the same room you put similarly a young male white Muslim convert, but who grew up in the south of England, whose parents vote conservative, he grew up on a huge estate, he's never struggled in life. I mean, these people can get along if they have the same values, but here in the UK we've seen that it's like they come from very, very different worlds, and these kind of divides are so deeply entrenched in the UK that it creates conflict and divisions in the society. One thing I really appreciate in Robert's view is he's completely against putting white converts on a pedestal, because this also creates a lot of division, especially since Muslims, specifically in the UK, are very, very selective towards which converts do they support and which do they leave behind. We see it on a daily basis. If someone who is rich, famous, or powerful embraces Islam, they're gonna idolize him. People are gonna make an idol out of them, consider them as some kind of prophet. We saw it with Joram van Klaveren. We saw it with Andrew Tate. And these people are made ambassadors of Islam, speaking for all Muslims 24 hours after the Shahada. Not mentioning all these Insta converts that become super rich, famous, and powerful very, very quickly, and 24 hours after the Shahada, they sell online courses about how to become the perfect Muslim. And there are people who take advantage of this idolization for making money out of their Muslimness. And some of them, I'm not sure, they're actually Muslim in real life. As always, when people see something very lucrative, you can make money out of it, people just are becoming uncritical. And it's the first rule of Islam. You do not make idols out of people. You do not worship mortals, no matter how rich, famous, and powerful they are, what is their skin color. And this is something I agree with Robert. This is not gonna build bridges. You're not gonna, all of a sudden have the world accept Islam and Muslims because you have this celebrity embracing Islam. For people to embrace Islam, it's hard work. It's gonna take a very, very long time. It happens at a microscopic level, showing by example. And talking about these dynamics, I very much respect Robert for him acknowledging that, when it comes to Black and Hispanic converts, they have it the worse. He supports the organization and the mobilization of people against racism. And again, one thing I really appreciate is how he considers whiteness as an amana. an amanah, just like wealth and knowledge in Islam. If you have a certain degree of wealth, you have to share it. This is why there is zakat. This is why there is sadaqah. If you have some degree of knowledge, you have to share it, otherwise it's not valid. Because whiteness opens doors in this society. This is how it works in Europe and North America. He argues that white Muslims have a responsibility of dawah towards their families, towards white people, because again, this is a human thing. It's instinctive. White people are going to be more likely to listen to other white people. Men are going to be more likely to listen to other men than women. What I appreciate with Robert is that he has a sense, he understands marginality, because he is just part of a minority within a minority. He understands what it is to be considered different. He's talked to many people, and he's got a degree in psychology, so that helps. Another guy who's been talking about it, I really respect, is Ali from Maliki Clique, and also because I really can relate to the history to some extent. He had a very, very difficult time embracing Islam. He went to prison, and after embracing Islam, he lost everything. So for someone who as well lost everything at some point in life, I really respect like how he just got up, stand on his 2 feet, and still, be out there, talk about Islam. So I think while Robert has a very legitimate initiative and valid concerns, my worries are these narrative, anything that it revolves around either nationality, ethnicity, are always on a slippery slope. Why? Because they're in history, they have been always and often appropriated, whether it is by the left, whether it is by the right, and turned into some exclusionary narratives. And this especially when people come to these places out of a place of pain. If I look at my own story, it would have been super easy for me to say that, oh, Muslims have hurt me so much, I'm gonna create my own space with only white Muslims around me. And this is the same kind of reasoning that has created spaces like the Red Pill, the Manosphere, and people end up in their own bubbles. And one thing that scares me about these kind of bubbles is that the human experience is meant to be a constant bursting of bubbles. If you want to understand life, if you want to understand society, if you want to get the right tools and learn about everything, you need to go out of your comfort zone. You need to be exposed to a variety of experiences. And this is why, for example, people who are like super rich, who never struggled once in their lives, have troubles understanding what does racism mean, what does poverty mean, because they don't know what does it mean to live like paycheck to paycheck. There are studies that show they cannot empathize with people, they cannot understand these kind of experiences. And as Muslims, we don't want to get to that point. We have a duty towards the poor, we have a duty towards orphans, widows, anyone who's vulnerable in the society. The Prophet used to be around the poor, those who were in debt, those who were slaves or former slaves. Islam, as people say, came as a shifa. It came to alleviate people who suffer. And this is why I believe that while it is legitimate to create spaces of solidarity, it is important never to cut ourselves from people who are from different cultures, socio-economic backgrounds, political opinions, whatever. The reason why is because for us who grew up in a white-dominated society, who are white, I can take my own example. I was taught from day one at school that the French are superior. I grew up in France, that French invented human rights, the concept like civilization, colonization was a good thing. My parents, the media, repeated on loop that black people are uncivilized, Muslims are barbaric, they're terrorists. And I was fed this narrative for 26 years of my life, and of course I believed it because I didn't have any other source that told me otherwise. There is a study that shows that when white people embrace Islam, it doesn't automatically get rid of their biases, their prejudices, or even nationalism. When I embraced Islam, I still believed for some years that Palestinians, children included, are all terrorists. Palestinians are all terrorists, including children, because, again, this is the narrative I was fed for 26 years of my life. The point is, it took me over a decade to deconstruct, to unlearn everything I was taught at school, by my parents, in the media, the government narrative. It takes a long time. to like unlearn every of these things. If these kinds of narratives are left unchecked, what I fear in the future in countries like Britain is to see a group of white Muslims imposing themselves as the sole representative of Islam in the country. And if you don't believe it's going to happen, let's look at Poland. In Poland, you have two main Muslim organizations. You have the Liga Muzułmańska, which is made of Muslims who are of immigrant descent, and you have the MZR. So the MZR is made of Tatars. There's only 2,000 Tatars in Poland according to the census, but they're white, they have Polish names, they're completely assimilated, they're recognized by the government, and these two organizations are sadly fighting to be the sole interlocutor, the sole representative of Muslims for the government. The Tatars argue that because they are native to Poland for generations, they are there since the 14th century, they've served in the army, they should be the legitimate interlocutors for the government. And the Liga Muzułmańska argues that because they are the most numerous Muslims in Poland, this is the biggest group, they are the ones who should be representative of Islam in Poland. And I'm not even sure that such a group are going to be very effective, because if you look at the public perception of Islam in Poland, despite the Tatars being in Poland for 7 centuries, a lot of Polish people still hate Islam. So it's not because you have a group of native white Muslims representing Islam in your country that public perceptions are going to change. It's not on the duty of Muslims to change how the dominant society works. This is a process which is super complex and super long term. Thankfully, at the time of recording this video, I haven't come across any actual Muslim white supremacists. However, as we are on a slippery slope, it might happen at some point. And one initiative I found online, I don't know if it's satirical or if it's actually serious, it wants to promote white Sharia. And the shocking thing is, when I saw this pyramid where you had people like descendants of the Prophet at the top, then white people in the middle, and some other people at the bottom. In this video, the guy argues that although there is nothing in the Quran, in the Hadith, about a superiority of, Arabs, descendants of the Prophet, or like white people over other people. Because we all know the sermon of the Prophet, right? When there are some fabricated Hadiths, which put black people as inferior. But this video argues from other scholarly tradition that descendants of the Prophets are closer to God just by lineage, and some other ethnicities are further from God, are inferior in a way. And that is not okay. I'm not a theologian, but it goes against everything I've learned about the prophetic tradition. Since when in Islam can you be closer to God according to your lineage? The first creature who thought that they were superior by essence, you know who it was? It was Iblis. And now you have people that, because they are closer to God by their lineage, they are superior by their lineage, they use religion to justify genocide. Lots of converts are struggling because they come from this place of pain, and it would be very easy for them to say that, no, I don't want to do anything with Muslims or with born Muslims. And I pray that these people never fall into exclusionary narratives. It has been super easy for me to be like that, to be, I was in an abusive marriage. It was very super easy for me to, generalize that all women are evil and this kind of things. Muslims are stewards of each other, and it's not because the mainstream Muslim community has failed, a few of us, that we should exclude people as well. We are here to be stewards, we are here to support people. It's not because we've been wronged that we need to wrong others as well, or allow people to wrong others. In the UK, you have lots of organizations who are supporting new Muslims. From the top of my mind, I can think New Beginnings, I can think Cambridge Crescent, which are organizations that bring together converts from all walks of life, all sorts of cultures, social, economic backgrounds. And you have non-specialized organizations that fulfill the same role, such as Rumi's Cave. Everyone is welcome. But again, because the UK context is very different from the North American one, people haven't felt the need to create white Muslim-only spaces here. That's all I wanted to share. So do you agree with the concept of white Muslim-only spaces, support spaces? Is it needed? Is there a way to do things differently? The only thing I pray for is that new Muslims are able to get the support they need, and that no one ever struggles like I did or some other people did. Thank you very much for watching. I hope it was useful. And as always, take care of yourselves and each other.